smart, careful woman trying to escape a mysterious stalker. She documented everything, preserved every piece of evidence, installed cameras, carried a gun. But her very preparation became the key to unlocking a truth more horrifying than she could have imagined. The stalker may never have existed, at least not in the way she believed. This is the case of Kristil Krug, where technology, marriage deception, and tragedy intersected, and where digital forensics told the story that people tried to hide. Kristil Krug was an engineer and scientist, someone whose training emphasized logic, precision, and careful observation. She was a mother of 3 children, working steadily toward financial independence. By late 2023, her marriage to Dan Krug had become strained, marked by periods of separation and growing distance. Friends would later describe the relationship as one that had reached an impasse, with Kristil beginning to discuss the possibility of divorce and the division of assets. Dan, who worked for a state health agency, was described by those who knew him as reserved and not particularly expressive with his emotions. He had no criminal record, but the cracks in their marriage were becoming impossible to ignore. In the final months of 2023, something changed. Kristil began receiving threatening messages that appeared to come from someone who claimed to know her from the past. The messages contained disturbingly accurate personal information details about her daily life that suggested the sender had been watching her closely. At first, Kristil tried to rationalize it. Perhaps someone had confused her with another person, or maybe it was a case of mistaken identity. But as the messages continued and escalated, that possibility became harder to believe. The content of these messages was calculating and invasive. They described her movements, referenced places she had been, and used language that felt deeply personal. Some messages arrived with statements like, "I am watching you." The timing was unsettling as well, often sent when Kristil was alone, or when she might feel most vulnerable. One message even included what appeared to be a photograph taken at Dan's workplace, which added another layer of confusion and fear to an already frightening situation. Kristil responded the way someone with her background might. She began keeping detailed logs, what she called her stalker log, documenting every message, every strange occurrence, every moment when she felt she was being observed. She installed security cameras around her home in Broomfield, Colorado, hoping they would either catch the person following her or at least provide her with some sense of safety. She legally obtained a firearm and began carrying it with her when she left the house. She confided in friends and colleagues, expressing a growing fear that someone was closing in on her. Those who knew her noticed the change. She became more guarded, more anxious, less willing to go places alone. She had trouble sleeping. Despite this mounting terror, she continued to go to work and care for her children, trying to maintain some semblance of normal life. Her friends later recalled how real her fear seemed. She genuinely believed she was in danger, that someone was stalking her, that the threat was external and imminent. She took every precaution she could think of, but the messages kept coming. The feeling of being watched never went away. Looking back, those close to Kristil would remember her increasing isolation and the sense that she felt trapped, as though walls were closing in around her. On the night of December 14th, 2023, Kristil's life came to a violent end. Her daily schedule had been routine that day, nothing out of the ordinary. The last message sent from her phone appeared at what seemed like an appropriate time. Later that evening, Dan called the police requesting a welfare check on Kristil. When officers arrived at the family home in Broomfield, they found the garage door open. Inside, they discovered Kristil's body. She had suffered blunt force trauma to the head and stab wounds. The scene was immediately strange, in ways that would become more significant as the investigation unfolded. The security cameras that Kristil had so carefully installed had been turned off before the incident occurred. There were no signs of forced entry, no indication that someone had broken into the home from the outside. Her wallet and phone were still in the house, ruling out robbery as a motive. Everything about the scene suggested that whoever had done this had either been let in or had access to the home. It was at this moment that the narrative began to shift in a direction no one had anticipated. As investigators began their work, they started with the most obvious question: who was the stalker that Kristil had been so afraid of? The threatening emails and messages were meticulously examined. When forensic analysts traced the digital footprints left behind, they made a startling discovery. Some of the threatening emails had been sent from an IP address that traced back to Dan's workplace. This did not immediately prove guilt, but it raised serious questions about who had actually been sending these messages. The investigation went deeper. Analysts examined the metadata attached to the photographs that had been sent to Kristil Images she believed had been taken by someone secretly following her. The metadata revealed something unexpected. The photos had been taken using a selfie timer mode. This did not match the behavior described in the messages, which suggested a hidden stalker lurking in shadows and capturing images without the subject's knowledge. A person genuinely stalking someone would not need to set a timer to photograph them. Investigators then uncovered financial transactions that painted an even clearer picture. Gift card purchases made by Dan coincided with the activation dates of a burner phone. That phone had been used to create fake email accounts, the same accounts that had sent threatening messages to Kristil. The timeline was precise. The phone was activated, the accounts were created, and the threatening messages began arriving all in a coordinated sequence. The phone's usage data showed activity that matched exactly with when Kristil reported receiving threats. Perhaps the most damning piece of digital evidence came from Kristil's own phone. After her death, a text message was sent from her device. Dan claimed he had not been present when this occurred. Digital forensics determined that the message had been scheduled in advance, set to send automatically at a specific time. This was not a message Kristil had sent herself in her final moments. It was a message programmed to create an alibi to suggest activity and life when there was none. Investigators obtained a warrant to search Dan's devices. The search history they found was chilling in its specificity and intent. Searches included phrases like, "How long does it take to lose consciousness from a head injury?" and "How to turn off home security cameras silently." These were not casual queries. They were research preparation for what was to come. Every piece of data was presented neutrally during the investigation without immediate interpretation, but the pattern was unmistakable when viewed as a whole. The case eventually went to trial. In court, two competing narratives emerged. The prosecution laid out a methodical timeline built on digital evidence. They argued that Dan had systematically created the illusion of a stalker to establish a motive and a scapegoat for Kristil's murder. The threatening messages, the burner phone, the scheduled texts, the suspicious search history. All of it pointed to careful planning and premeditation. The prosecution presented the marriage's deterioration, discussions of divorce, and potential conflicts over finances and custody as underlying motivations. They argued that Dan had used his technical knowledge to construct an elaborate false scenario, one designed to shift suspicion away from himself. The defense countered by highlighting gaps in the physical evidence. There was no DNA directly linking Dan to a murder weapon. The crime scene had contained DNA that had not been definitively identified. The defense argued that the investigation had been too narrow, too focused on digital evidence, while potentially overlooking other possibilities. They raised questions about whether the police had fully explored all leads, whether alternative explanations had been adequately considered. They asked the jury to maintain reasonable doubt, to recognize that digital evidence, while compelling, was not the same as direct physical proof. Witnesses from both sides were called. Kristil's family and friends described the changes they had observed in her during those final months. Her increasing fear, her conviction that she was being hunted. Colleagues testified about conversations in which she expressed genuine terror. These testimonies painted a picture of a woman who believed completely and sincerely that she was in danger from an outside threat. The tragedy was that she had been right to be afraid, just not of the person she thought. After deliberating on all the evidence presented, the jury reached a verdict. Dan Krug was found guilty of first-degree murder, 2 counts of stalking, and 1 count of impersonation. The conviction was based on the cumulative weight of the digital evidence, the pattern of behavior before, during, and after Kristil's death, and the lack of any credible alternative explanation that could account for all the facts. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing hearing, members of Kristil's family spoke about their loss, about the children who would grow up without their mother, about a life cut short by someone who was supposed to protect her. The Kristil Krug case became significant beyond the tragedy of one family. It demonstrated how digital forensics could build a complete narrative when traditional physical evidence was limited. Metadata from photos, IP address logs, phone activation records. Scheduled messages and search histories came together to tell a story that would have been impossible to reconstruct even a decade earlier. The case showed that in the modern age, digital traces can be as revealing, and sometimes more so, than fingerprints or DNA. For those working with victims of stalking and domestic violence, the case served as a sobering reminder of how technology can be weaponized. It raised important questions about how to distinguish genuine threats from manufactured ones, how to protect potential victims when the threat might be coming from inside their own homes, and how to recognize warning signs when an abuser is actively creating false narratives. The case underscored the importance of early intervention, of taking stalking reports seriously, and of examining all possibilities, even uncomfortable ones, when someone reports feeling unsafe. At a broader level, the case spoke to something many people prefer not to acknowledge: that violence in relationships often happens behind closed doors, in homes that appear normal from the outside, perpetrated by people who seem unremarkable. The deterioration of a relationship, the struggle for control, the fear of losing status or resources. These common human conflicts can sometimes lead to unspeakable acts. Kristil's case showed how a relationship's breakdown can escalate in ways that are not immediately visible to outsiders, and how someone experiencing abuse may not even fully recognize the danger they are in until it is too late. What makes this case particularly haunting is that Kristil did everything right. She documented the threats. She installed security systems. She armed herself. She told people what was happening. She took every reasonable precaution. But the threat was not what she thought it was, and her defensive measures could not protect her from someone who had intimate access to her life and who understood exactly how to circumvent those protections. Her preparation meant to save her instead became part of the evidence trail that would ultimately reveal the truth. The story of Kristil Krug is not just a family tragedy. It demonstrates how technology can be used to conceal the truth, but also how technology ultimately exposes it. It is a story about fear control and the digital traces that human beings cannot completely erase, no matter how carefully they plan. This case reminds us that domestic violence takes many forms, that stalking can be orchestrated by those closest to us, and that the justice system must evolve to recognize digital evidence as a crucial component of modern investigations. It shows that when physical evidence is scarce, the electronic footprints we leave behind can speak volumes about intent, planning, and guilt. Most importantly, it stands as a testament to Kristil's memory and a call to remain vigilant about the warning signs of domestic violence in all its forms. If this case raises questions for you about how digital evidence works in criminal investigations, or if you have thoughts about how we as a community can better protect potential victims of stalking and domestic violence, please share your perspective in the comments based on the facts as they have been established by the courts. Subscribe to follow more in-depth explorations of complex and mysterious cases like this one, where the truth often lies hidden beneath layers of deception, waiting to be uncovered by those patient enough to look.